10 signs your online date can be trusted. The 21st century is now reaching its peak when it comes to modern-day romance. Gone are the long love letters, pen pal systems, and going out into the physical world to search for love, because nowadays the love of your life may be among the many lists of names that one could find on social media. Online dating is more active than ever as many people look for their soulmates through the blue screen. While some dating cases turn out to be dead ends, meeting people online can also be a way to finally find the person you will love forever. Transparency is quite important when it comes to online dating. That is why we listed down below the top 10 signs you should look for in order to know if your online date can be trusted. 1. He or she respects you. Respect is the most important quality you should look for in your online date. He or she must respect you in all aspects, meaning that the person knows the limitations in your relationship. A few of the big no-nos are, stalking you in all social media profiles, harassing you with spam messages, or asking you for very personal information. But if your date does not do any of the things above and he or she seems like a really neat person, then there is no reason to sound out the alarms. Be careful of the many scammers though. 2. He or she doesn't ask for money. This is one of the many major red flags to look out for. If your online date does not ask you for money, then there is a good chance that he or she is trustworthy. Many people nowadays would use online dating as an opportunity to chat up and attract other people in order to gain monetary profit. Be cautious of such predators. If your date is really interested in you, then he or she would make a conscious effort to get to know the person that you are and not how much money you make or can give. Asking for money is a breach of trust right there. If he or she ever pops the question, rethink the relationship immediately. 3. He or she has a complete social media profile. As mentioned earlier, transparency is very important in any kind of relationship. It is usually a good sign if your online date has a few or many active social media profiles. You will be able to look him or her up and see if the information he or she gave out is accurate. Don't worry, because you won't need to stalk him or her to know the truth. If your online date doesn't have any other social media profile except the one that he or she uses to talk to you, then perhaps it is important to get to know them better. There are a lot of so-called posers on the internet nowadays. That is why everyone has to be careful and confirm if the profile they are talking to is the actual and real person. 4. He or she is consistent. If he or she is consistent in the stories that he or she shares, then that is another good sign that you may be able to trust your online date. Liars, especially compulsive ones, have a difficult time in being consistent with the lies that they tell. It is of great importance to pay attention to the stories they tell, or you might just miss a detail. Your date should also be consistent in the way you communicate with each other. If he or she insists on shifting social media platforms when talking, or if he or she takes too long to reply and messages you randomly, then that sounds a bit fishy. Perhaps there is something that your date doesn't want you to know. Although remember that this is not always the case. Always look out for consistency in his or her actions. 5. He or she shares about his or her life. Your online date does not necessarily have to share with you his or her deepest, darkest secrets in order for you to trust him or her. But if he or she is comfortable enough to share with you, then you may be able to get to know them better. With more information about your date, you can decide whether to trust them or not. The getting to know process in every relationship is risky, but if you are truly interested in the person, then you should be able to open up little by little. Remember also to give your date a reason to trust you too. Don't share any of their personal information to other people. 6. He or she looks out for your safety. Caring people are more often than not trustworthy people. An online date who cares enough about your safety can be a good sign of trust. He or she may call you when you get home or message you if you are alright. It is natural for people to check up on the people they love and their well-being. Although this can be sweet, be mindful enough to not drown in another person's sweet talk. It is up to you to decide the sincerity of one's messages. 7. He or she has never stood you up before. If your online date has never stood you up before in a meeting, then that could be a good thing. Dates who don't want to meet personally deserve suspicious minds. It is important that even if you met online, You should also be able to meet in person every now and then. If you have decided to meet up and he or she ditched you, then your date must have a really good excuse for doing so. Ditching is not very acceptable and it is a definite sign of mistrust. You can't expect someone who can't keep up dates to keep up a relationship. 8. He or she never makes lame excuses. This sign is closely tied with consistency. It is a good sign if your online date never makes lame excuses for contacting you. If he or she spouts one more often than you'd like, then maybe it is not a good idea to trust that person with your love and trust. If your online date truly cares about you, then he would never make an excuse, let alone a very lame one, to you. He or she would know that the amount of time you spend with each other is vital as making the relationship stronger. 9. He or she is willing to meet personally. Online dates who choose to hide behind their blue screens are not to be trusted. Even video calls are not enough to say that you completely trust the person. Face-to-face interactions are significant in every relationship. Even online ones have to meet every now and then. Set up a date and time for you to meet each other. Online relationships are strengthened by personal meetings. By seeing them face to face, you are able to get to know them better rather than facing them on a blue screen. If you are meeting your online date for the first time, it is also safe if you can come along with your friend as a third wheel. This is an important safety precaution, especially if you're a lady. Your friend may also help you determine if your online date is indeed trustworthy or not. Besides, if your online date really respects you as a woman, he will also respect your safety. 10. He or she shows himself or herself as trustworthy. An online date who makes a conscious effort to make you trust him or her is a good sign. A conscious effort can classify as introducing him or herself to other people in your social circle, taking the time to visit you personally, or even just being consistent in his or her messages. He or she doesn't really have to explicitly state to you to trust him or her. Your date can show it through his or her actions. After all, actions do speak louder than words. Trust is a matter of choice. Whether or not your online date has any of the signs mentioned above, at the end of the day, it is up to you to decide if the person is trustworthy or not. No matter how many signs you look for, if you don't want to trust the person, then you wouldn't trust him or her. Love is all about taking risks, but it does not mean taking risks stupidly. Remember that every choice you make has its own consequences. Online dating has its risks, but it can be fruitful too. Always remind yourself to make smart choices.